Come get your victory at the table. Let's talk. Let's talk. Come get your victory at the table. Let's talk. Let's talk.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on whatever time you have decided to tune in with us. We would like to welcome you to another episode of Victory at the Table Talk, where we have down-to-earth conversations about various topics to assist with your walk with Christ. Here at the table, you can get the victory, but you can also get a taste of Victory Apostolic Church right here in Matteson, Illinois, where we are building victorious Christ-like lives. Enjoy this episode.
Praise the Lord and welcome to another Victory at the Table Talk. I am Evangelist Stephanie Efford with the Health and Wellness Ministry, the director. Today we are discussing domestic violence awareness. And I would like to give our disclaimer for today. Any information that is shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and for educational purposes. Any event, any discussion that we have, if there is an issue involved, you need to contact the proper authorities, get assistance. In the event of an emergency, please dial 911. This podcast is for mature audiences only, which means that children should not be watching this podcast. It will be very open, and we intend to discuss everything frankly. So with that being said, we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce our guests. Our first guest is LaSandra Hutchinson. She's with Anew, which is formerly the South Suburban Family Services Group, and she's been with them for 2 years. Our other guest is Commander Lacey with the Dolton Police Department. He's been there for 27 years. And I really want to thank him for coming out today at the last minute. My son, who is the acting deputy chief at that station, was able to pull him in for this discussion. So thank you, Commander Lacey, for joining us.
It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. So we're going to get started with this month being Domestic Violence Awareness Month. There are some stats that I would like to share. These stats come from the WHO organization, which is the World Health Organization. The stats involve some things we never think about. One of them is holidays in domestic violence. Would you all think of one holiday that you think is more cases of domestic violence? Just name a holiday you think is the worst for domestic violence.
I'd say around Christmas time.
What's yours?
Agreed. Christmas.
Yes.
It's New Year's.
Is it?
New Year's.
Okay.
New Year's. You know, people go out and drink and
Yeah.
they get drunk. And so a lot of more violence occurs at that time. They average 2.7 times more than the average time. So it's more incidents. Now, another area that is a problem is COVID-19. Since COVID-19, you'll talk about in a little bit, COVID-19 has put a real strain on domestic violence and abuse because people are home.
Sure.
They're home, they're out of jobs, so it's a lot going on right now with that. The other issue is the cost of domestic violence. There an average of $12 billion spent each year on domestic violence. And I believe that money is being spent with support services that are offered because that comes through mostly government funding. So I believe that's where that cost is coming from. Now, the number of, I was talking to you about this earlier, they said in the next 20 years, they expect that more seniors will be involved in domestic violence. And that's a big issue as well. So domestic violence and family, they say domestic and family violence. That's another word for another word they're using is domestic abuse. Okay, we talked about that as well. So domestic abuse by itself basically means something happened in the home with your partner, your fiance, your child. It could be your elderly. They've expanded in Illinois. They've expanded the ruling with the government that states that domestic abuse is basically someone's trying to force sex on you or someone slapped you or something like that. They've expanded that, which is a good thing. So here in Illinois, we look at it a little bit differently, but you're going to share some of that information as well, and then also you too, Lysandra. Sure. Now, the scope of the problem is worldwide. What they're saying is nearly 1 in 3 women, that's 33% of the population of women, will experience domestic violence from 15 on. And I'm fortunate. I'm not trying to make light of this because this is serious, but I've never had to deal with that. I'm grateful to God, but I do know people that have, and it is very devastating for them. The challenge, emotional and otherwise, it's just a struggle. So the other part is that according to the countries, the 2 countries with the most domestic violence, can you kind of think about what that is? Guess, maybe? I'm going to give you the names. You got Africa, you got Eastern Asia, you got Pacific, and you got the Americas. So which one do you think has the most domestic violence? Just guess.
Well, we live here, so I'm going to say America.
We're not.
Oh, okay.
Would it be Africa?
It's Africa.
Okay.
And next in line is East Asia.
Okay.
We are at a pretty good, decent, I'm not saying none of this is decent, but our numbers are 25%. And the lowest one is Western Pacific at 22.
Wow.
It's still not good, but we're not the highest. And there's a lot of incidents in Africa. I've heard about it. It is serious in Africa. The issue there is they don't have the services that we have. So it makes it a little bit harder. So now we're going to let Lysandra talk about domestic violence. What exactly is domestic violence?
Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all, Evangelist
welcome.
Stephanie. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is such an important topic. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, October,
Yes.
so I know that's why we're focusing on it this month in particular, wanting to raise awareness and educate the community. Domestic violence is really a pattern of abusive behaviors that happens between intimate partners. And we focus on the word pattern because it's not a one-time incident. It's something that occurs through a cycle of abuse. And so usually when we educate people, we let them know that the cycle of abuse is what makes it so pervasive. Often these relationships start out really normal, like any other relationship, in what's called the honeymoon phase. And so the abusive partner tends to be very charming at first, very kind, and seems really normal. But what happens in these relationships is that the person that ends up being abused, the victim, feels that they're walking on eggshells. A tension builds between the partners, and then there's an incident of violence. The violence could be physical, emotional, sexual, financial, verbal, but some type of violence plays out or happens, and then they go back to a honeymoon period.
Is that because there's a cycle you go through with domestic violence?
It's called the cycle of abuse.
Yes.
And so this is what makes it hard to identify for many people, but this pattern plays out over and over again. Sometimes the time time varies for the relationships of how long it may take for it to happen again, but if it is an issue of domestic violence, that pattern and that cycle is going to continue.
Thank you. So based on what you just said, there was a chart that says that they do the blame game first, and then they try to ask them to forgive them, and they believe them. The cycle then goes to you try to please the abuser regardless. And this is even in the midst of them abusing you. You know you've been abused, but you kind of, I don't know if because you care for the person, or are they afraid to take a step outside of the relationship? What typically is happening at that point when they go through the cycle?
So there's so many different factors of why a person continues to stay. Some of it is just threats. The person has been threatened a lot, and so there maybe have been threatened that the abuser is going to harm them, harm their family, harm their children, kick them out of the house. They may be financially dependent upon the abuser, and so they feel like they can't leave or they can't challenge them because they need that security or that financial support from the abuser. Often, too, the abuse is crazy making, and so the abuser.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the abuser will gaslight. That's kind of a hot topic word, or hot word right now, buzzword. But the abuser may do something to provoke the victim, undermine them, and abuse them, and then turn around and say, I hit you, or I called you out your name, or I locked you out the car and left you in the cold because you did this.
Oh, so I got you.
Yeah.
So they blame game. They have to reverse roles.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so then the victim begins to question their sanity. They don't know if it's them or the abuser. They're not sure if they're a part of the problem or if something's happening to them. It becomes very convoluted for them, especially over time, because their confidence is being chipped away as a result of the abuse.
Yes. Okay, so for you, Commander Lacey, when it comes to dealing with women and men, but I'm going to ask you about the men in a minute. When you're dealing with women and men, how many calls have you had from men regarding abuse or violence, domestic violence?
You know, there's not a big number as far as what we've had as far as men. It mostly women are dominating as far as domestic abuse. I mean, and it doesn't have to be like you brought out and as was brought out, a woman that is in fact abused. Men are abused too. I mean, and see when abuse comes, it's basically feelings. Feelings are there. So you start out, like say you start out the honeymoon phase. That honeymoon phase is, I'll do anything in the world for you. And then what happens is as they get comfortable, man or woman, then what happens, that's when abuse starts because they feel what I call is I got you phase. I've got you to where, guess what? Whatever I do at this point, you're going to forgive me for. And it could be emotional, it could be financial, to where they can't survive or they feel they can't survive on their own, but they really can.
Right. And then it reminds me, there's, Lifetime on TV. A lot of those movies deal with this. And I've looked at them. I don't look at them at all anymore. But I will say this. A lot of those movies are typically exactly what we're talking about right now.
Sure.
The exact example of what goes on.
Sure.
Not saying they're made for education, but it does help you understand in those circumstances. In every movie that I've ever seen, it was not where the woman was able to get educated and empowered. That was not part of the movie. The movie was more about this is what's happening with her, the violence, what goes on. He gets arrested or he gets killed, but there's no positivity that comes out of that. Right. So I want to talk with you again, Lysandra, about profiling the abuser.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this goes along with Officer Lacey's point, too, that he just made. Oftentimes when the abuse cycle starts, the abuser will test the victim. And so it doesn't start off extreme, like all of a sudden the first incident of abuse is I black your eye. Because most people would leave if it was that extreme.
Right.
It starts subtle. It's a subtle, it could be the silent treatment.
Yes.
Will you allow me to manipulate you if I don't pick up the phone at first? Then if the person stays after that, what if I call this person a name? Would they take that? What if I block them and then turn around and then add them back to my phone? How much can I? What if I push them and then say, oh, it was an accident? And it's building over time. It's getting worse. Research shows that every time they go through the cycle of abuse, the violence is more severe.
Yes.
So it starts off very subtle. It's hard to see that you're getting sucked in, you're getting baited into this.
Yes.
And so that's what's also a very, like a nuance to domestic violence.
And that's pretty. Go ahead if you're not finished.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to the fact that an abuser also is very Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And so when you look at a profile of an abuser, most of them in the community are a shining star. They're philanthropic, they seem heroic, they're well-spoken, some of them are very educated, they seem very tender-hearted and attuned to their partner in public. The violence is only happening behind closed doors. So this also complicates it for the victim because if they go out and tell someone else, this person's actually really abusive, they think people would look at them as if they were crazy. Like, this person's abusing you, you gotta be mistaken.
Yeah.
Everyone would wanna be with someone like the guy or the woman that you're with.
And then they're probably ashamed.
Yeah.
You know, they're ashamed because now I married this person, I'm with this person, I'm engaged, they're my partner, and I didn't expect this.
Right.
So now this has happened to me. I'm just going to be quiet about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go about my day and endure it. And so that's pretty serious. So at this point, now we know what the profile is. You know, they carry many different faces, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Go ahead.
And I'm sorry, I was just, it's just what she was saying was 100%. But from what I've found is when you have somebody that is being abused, male or female, and they manipulate them. They start out small and they go big. They do it behind closed doors, and the partner at some point thinks it's normal. There is nothing normal about domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Absolutely.
There's nothing normal about somebody who supposedly loves you and treating you like that.
Right.
Domestic abuse is a killer.
Yes.
And it's something that is in fact growing in this country. But that's something you have to understand is there are resources. You don't have to stay in this. You know,
Right.
you can, but you have to want to get out of it from what I found.
Absolutely.
And that is very true. We're going to talk about that because this is really deep.
Yeah.
And it's really apparent to me why it would not be good to have someone come on here and talk about this for their safety's sake.
Sure.
And the fact that it will make them emotional. When you're going through something like that, I'm quite sure some women, a lot of them have gotten over this. They've gotten out and gotten over it. But those are scars that exist that will stay with them forever.
Sure.
And also when it comes to the children, you know, now we're talking about a family. Let's say it's a family. Their kids, whether they're married or not, there are children in that household now. So what happens with those children in the case of abuse where it's a female male, the male partner is the one that's abusing the female, now the police are called. Mm-hmm. So here we go with you.
Well, you know, once the police are called, there are certain signs that we look for in reference to what's going on in that household. Because sometimes the victim, which is the mother, does not want to say this is what he's doing. Mm-hmm. But that child will never tell a story as far as it. And you can tell on their face because they're fearful, they're hurt. They'll tell you in a minute, hey, this guy's abusing my mommy. Yeah. So the police officer has to make the determination of what action he's going to take. If there's any signs of physical abuse, and you know, I'll say it, I am zero tolerance for domestic, but it's out there. This is what we deal with. This is what you deal with. This is what I deal with. This is a blessing for this program. Yes. But it's out there. So when the police get there, the police have to make the determination as to what's actually going on in that household. And if it warrants an arrest, then you make an arrest. If it warrants taking someone out of the home, you take them out of the home. But you have to make a determination when that officer gets there. So the child will definitely tell you the story as to what's going on prior to the police getting there.
Okay. So in a case where, give you another case scenario because I'm just trying to understand.
Sure.
This part about kids is very serious for me because I'm not saying it happened to me, but I care about kids. So in an incident like we were just talking about, police came to the house. They made an assessment of whether the person had to be arrested or not. The person was arrested. Let's say you come back 2 or 3 more times. Mm-hmm. Does it cause a problem for the mother because these incidents keep happening and she's staying with him where it's related to the child's safety?
Well, okay, so what you're asking me is the mother more in danger because we are returning to the home?
Right.
You know what? I can say that there's definitely a problem in that house, and the mother has to make the determination as far as her safety. And if she doesn't want to make the determination as far as her safety, make the determination as far as the child's safety.
That's what
because when the police come back 2, 3 times, to me, 1 time is 1 time too many. But it happens. We know this. This is what we see. But when the police come back, the police should take action, some form of action. That guess what? We were here for this reason, and we've done some kind of action as far as trying to protect the mother and the kids, even if it's making the spouse leave. Do a cooling off period. I've always called it a pause. Mm-hmm. To where the spouse has to leave. And then maybe you guys pick it up another day to where you feel that comfortable to where you want to talk about it, or you feel that you want to get out of this. And there are a lot of resources to where you can utilize that we have that you can use to get out of the situation that you're in.
Thank you, Lacey. And so, Lysandra, going forward, who are the victims that you normally serve in the community?
Well, we serve everyone, really. So we serve men and women, every gender, every socioeconomic status, every sexual orientation. We have an office that's in Homewood, so we primarily are in the south suburbs, but we also have an office that's in on the southwest side of Chicago.
Okay.
So everywhere, primarily from the south suburbs to the south side of Chicago, are the majority of the people that we service.
Okay. And your services are?
Goodness. So we have a lot of services.
Okay.
Again, our organization was called South Suburban Family Shelter for 40 years. We recently rebranded, and the new name is Anew, Building Beyond Violence and Abuse. And so the idea behind it is that people can come, access our services, and start anew, building new life free of violence, free of abuse. We have comprehensive services. All of our services are free, and all of them are confidential. So we have counseling, which is a huge, important aspect, you know, of recovery and healing, and even identifying the fact that you're being abused.
Right.
Sometimes the victims don't recognize that they're experiencing domestic violence until they have their intake appointment with their counselor, and the counselor starts to educate them about the dynamics of domestic violence. That's when the light bulb goes off for them, and then they'll continue with their counseling appointment. So.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Do they do any proactive teaching or education about domestic violence?
Yeah, so we have a community education program, which is the program that's the program that I'm a part of, and we train everyone, police, people from churches.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, we are in the schools, various schools. We have partnerships with other community agencies, and so we come out and we offer domestic violence 101. That's what we call
excellent.
it. Trainings.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also a training called Safe from the Start, where we address the impact of domestic violence on children.
Excellent. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so with that being said, let's move on to when it comes to college students. I know typically when you go to college, you're over 18. So are you considered someone that could go to use your services at that point? Now, let's say you're under your parents at that point. So let's say a person under 18 was being abused at home, but their mom and their mom did not call anyone. The mom could be the one abusing them, or the father didn't, was the one abusing them. The point is, no one called for any help for this child. What happens to them?
When we come, we definitely service people that are 18 and over can access any of our services. If they're under 18, sometimes they can come see, in some cases, see a counselor for a certain amount of sessions without parental consent. Other times, if it's like a DCFS issue, we report them there.
You're mandated reporters.
Yes.
Right. Okay, you're mandated reporters.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's good information to know. So what I wanted to talk about is share some facts and some myths
If I
about.
may,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. When you just brought up the DCFS, they're and they are of young age to where they're not 18 and older. Yes, you can call DCFS, and they have been very proactive as far as coming out, as far as dealing with the situation. So when you have a child in the age of 17 and younger, just know that yes, there are resources for them also, because a lot of them think that this is my mom, nothing's going to happen. No, when that officer gets there, then that officer will make that assessment towards DCFS, and actually the officer should, in fact, if you have a situation in the home towards it involves a child, put it in the report and contact DCFS so they can do a follow-up.
Okay. So when you put that in a report, you actually contact DCFS yourself?
Yes, we contact DCFS and we advise them of the situation. They, in fact, will have someone come out, I believe, within a 24-hour period.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Yes. Although I hate to hear DCFS, because sometimes it means that child's displaced and they experience trauma, not only from the event that happened, from being displaced from their home. So it's just a lot. It's just a lot.
It's a traumatization for all involved.
It is.
And that's where, that's why this is really great that this program is going on right now towards we're talking about it, because everybody in that home is traumatized.
Absolutely.
But what they have to understand is there are resources to get counseling as you new offers. There's resources to where if it is placement, it doesn't necessarily have to mean it's in a stranger's home. It can be a relative to where they're placed at.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
if
you.
I can add to that point too, at Anew, we offer counseling for the children too. So you can come, you can also bring your children and they can speak to a children's counselor.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's trained as well. We also have a transitional home called the Sanctuary. And so women and their children can come stay for a period of time, and they are given life experience, training, and finances, and then also they receive counseling if
That's
they come
excellent.
stay at the transitional house. And then just a few other services that we offer are we offer emergency shelter. And so as you spoke about, COVID created, a huge issue with domestic violence. So we really had to shift and strategize as an agency to be able to prolong how long people could be in emergency shelter, because there was such a high need for it at the time. We also offer medical advocacy, and so we have advocates that are in the urgent care centers and the emergency room, educating people and screening for domestic violence as well.
I'm going to talk about that. I remember about 3-4 years ago, somewhere in there, every time you went to the emergency room or urgent care, they were like, are you a victim of domestic violence? They screen you. And this was years ago. It's further back than that. And I was like, I said, why are you asking me that? And then he said, this is what we do now, because they want you to be able to speak out about it so you can get the help you need, even though some people are so timid and afraid, because fear is a monster when it comes to domestic violence. But I do remember when they implemented that, because I was like, I'm not being abused. Why are you coming here asking me? But it's really important. So what I'm going to do now is share a couple of facts about domestic violence. Every 15 seconds in the United States, a person is beaten. Every 15 seconds. Domestic violence results in more injuries that require medical attention than rape, accidents, and muggings combined. 2 in 5 women are murdered and killed by their husbands. At least 95% of people, in all cases, the partner abusive lies with a man beating a woman. That's what happens in most cases. Violence in the home usually becomes more frequent and severe over time, which is what we talked about. The abuser apologizes, but they don't mean it. And the violence will not occur again. That's what they say. So they stay with them. Children who grow up in violent homes come to believe that violence is normal. And we know that because a lot of the perpetrators are out there as adults because they grew up in homes where there was a lot of violence. And it's often a pattern of threats, insults, jealousy, explosive temper, and attempts to isolate and overpower the individual. Now, here are some of the myths. A man's home is his castle. No one should interfere with the family. Battery is a crime. Now, we're talking about the battery. We're going to talk about that. No one has the right to beat another person. That's what you were saying earlier. Another myth. A woman who gets beaten brings it upon herself, and by nagging and provoking the spouse, boyfriend, or partner. That's not true. Correct? Correct. Okay, a person who stays with an abuser after being beaten must like being beaten. That's not true. We know that.
Well, it's not true.
They just are not able to break away. And that's the hard part. So I'm glad that there is information that can be shared proactively at the onset of it. The other part I want to talk about for you is order of protection. I asked him earlier, when you go to a location and a family is having an event, I'm calling them events, and we know that this person harmed the other person, female, male. At this point, what happens to protect the other person? I know you're talking about a cooling off period, but if someone's physically hurt someone, now we're talking about arrest.
Sure.
Okay.
You're talking about arrest at that point. To whereas the officer gets there are physical signs of abuse, to whereas one party or the other has been abused. So the officer makes the arrest. The subject goes of course, to jail. They go see the judge in the morning, and there's a 72-hour cooling off period. Now, depending on the severity of it, then, and realistically, it's not even the severity of it. The judge has the option of extending the order of protection that for the benefit of the victim. So that would give the victim time to get out of, the home, resources, to where they can get out of the relationship. And then that's where the order of protection will, in fact, come in play.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of information, a lot of people just don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. They have no idea. A lot of people don't use the internet. They don't know how to look up things and find out resources. So it's very important that they know about resources like your location, also the hotline, that is used for this. Do you have that information? Because I know I came across it. It's a hotline that's used to provide resources locally for people that are it's domestic hotline and
We have a 24-hour hotline.
for your location.
Yeah, for our location. It's on the paper that you have in front of
Okay.
you.
But if they don't know you exist, there is a national
yeah.
hotline for domestic abuse. And
Yes.
if they were to look that up, that group is able to refer you locally
Exactly.
to persons for services. Yes, yes, sir.
And then when you do have that, the officer gives the victim, male or female, a form for the resources that are available to them.
That's
and,
good.
and that will, in fact, give them a chance to contact these resources to where they can, like I said earlier, get out of the situation, get out of the home, because a lot of them feel that, guess what, I have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And you always have options. And your options are, guess what, utilize Anew.
Yes.
Utilize the domestic violence form that you're given from the officer, because the officer will give you that form so you can look and make some phone calls.
If I could add to this point from Officer Lacey too, we also have a court advocacy program, and so our new court advocates are at the Markham Courthouse and civil court and also criminal court, educating the victims once they come in about their rights according to the Illinois Domestic Violence Act, and then helping them obtain their order of protection. Also, just being with them for emotional support while they're in the courthouse, because it can be intimidating and very scary. Sometimes the abuser will show up at the courthouse to intimidate them. So the court advocates are there to walk them through the entire process.
And that's important. And it's so important that they have support so they can get through the challenges. Now, the last part I'm going to talk about 10 warning signs. Does your partner do this? Put you down, call you names, control where you are or who you spend time with, being very possessive, hit you, kick you, strangle you. That's serious. Now, at that point, I'm gone.
Absolutely.
I'm going. Blame you for their violent or abusive behaviors. We talked about that. Threaten to take your children away. That's kind of really, they'll keep a woman there. They don't want their children gone. Treat you like a servant or make all decisions in a relationship with finances and where you can go, who you can talk to on the phone. Prevent you from getting or keeping a job. Make or carry out threats. We talked about threats. Make you afraid using looks or gestures. Exhibit extreme jealousy and pressure or force you into unwanted sex. At that point, we're talking about rape.
Sure.
It doesn't matter if you're married.
Right.
It's still considered rape.
Yep.
So this has been very, very, very informative. I am very glad that you have a new name that makes more sense. And it's more encouraging. Even the color is purple. I looked at the little tagline and everything. And so the color for domestic violence awareness is purple. We're all wearing our purple ribbons. And we ask that each of you remember this is a special month. And this is a serious event that takes place in homes and colleges with children, with elderly, with adults. So we want to make sure that you are aware, and education means empowerment. Once you are empowered with something like this, you can move forward. And I've never experienced it, but I know it's very traumatizing. So these two beautiful people that came out today to join, Officer Lacey and Ms. Hutchinson, we thank them for joining us today. Do you have any final words or any information you want to share?
Absolutely. Again, we have a 24-hour hotline that's also a bilingual hotline. All of our services are in English and Spanish. You can find us online at www.anewdv.org. Also, you can find us on Facebook. It's also, if you look up Anew Building Beyond Violence and Abuse, you can find our page on Facebook, and feel free to reach out. Where everything is free and confidential again.
And that's important. I had about privacy.
Yeah.
So that is very important
Yeah.
because people are intimidated if they can't, all the information they share is not kept private.
Sure.
Final words?
And when it comes down to domestics, your partner, it's basically control. They're trying to control you, and you weren't put here to be controlled.
Amen.
Okay. So you got to understand that you do have resources, and even if you feel that you don't, you do. If you're in a situation to where you can't make that call, pick the phone up and just dial 911. We're coming. We're coming, because when you dial 911, the police are automatically coming, so the dispatcher can hear what's going on. Once the police get there, they'll make a determination, and you will get the resources that you need. So don't think that you don't have resources. You have resources, and please use them.
Yes, and the whole purpose of the police to come out is to help protect you.
Yeah.
So I know this is a very sensitive subject. And I just encourage everyone. They both gave very important information for you to move forward. We also encourage you to take advantage of your church resources. Clergy is important. We hope that you are keeping your prayer life in check. Pray, and then at the same time, seek counseling from within your church, and don't be afraid to go to your church members, whoever is qualified. You can't talk to everybody, but we have resources, I know, here at Victory. So I thank you for joining us today. I ask that you continue to be educated, be empowered, and be blessed. God bless you.
Thank you.
Come get your victory at the table. Let's talk. Let's talk. Come get your victory.